Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join T2 and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
And welcome to the T2 Hubcast with me, Spencer Locker.
And me, Tracy Roberts.
Hiya, Tracy.
It's been a while, hasn't
It
it?
feels like ages.
We've been busy, haven't we?
Busy. Hey, a good type of busy mind.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
We've all been out on the road. We've been from Paris to Berlin. Is that a song?
Maybe. Maybe.
I'm making it up as I go along,
Yeah.
but we've been busy. Okay, maybe. Where have you been recently? Warwickshire?
I haven't been to Madrid or Paris. But yeah, I've been
He's
around
getting a
bit.
dig in there, guys,
Yeah.
just in case you wondered.
Yeah.
But he does love Warwick.
I love Warwickshire.
Warwickshire.
I love it, do.
We're working with some cool clients, haven't
Yes. And Staffordshire.
we? Staffordshire.
And Gloucestershire. Yeah.
And I've had a couple of days in Hull this week, which has been nice, working with LEW.
All right, okay.
And they've been fab. And we were doing some work with Sewell in the last few weeks. And who have we got in today? We've got in the NHS. So
yeah.
we've got a wide range of clients we've been working really closely with, and we've just loved it, haven't we? But we just thought, hey, back in the podcast booth.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing, is because I don't know about you, Tracy, but when I'm out, particularly on the road, with clients for extended periods of time, I get these little ideas pop in my head, and I think,
oh yeah,
ooh, and he might not be initially thinking we ought to do a podcast about that, but you just sort of think about it for a bit, and it sort of grows wings, doesn't it?
It does.
And you think, well, let's talk about that.
I always end up with loads of that, especially when I'm driving. Yeah, driving or in the shower, that's where you get your best ideas, they reckon, isn't it?
I'm in the bathroom. I'm in the bathroom, but I ain't having a shower when I get my best ideas.
Oh dear. Okay. Well, today I thought let's start looking at something from another angle, because we talk a lot about culture. It's a big part of what we do.
Huge.
And we talk about toxicity levels.
Yes.
A lot. But what we tend to do here is, because of the nature of the work that we're doing, is we try to advise people who are within the business to look out for the signs of it, to put things in place to avoid toxic culture. We even talk to people about how to manage personalities that create the toxic culture. And it got me thinking of something that was personal to me, but then another conversation I was having with one of our other partners around the other side of it, which is recovering from a toxic environment. So from an individual's perspective, this could be a leader, someone who's joining a business, someone new to work relatively, what it does to a person to have had to remove themselves from that situation. So what I mean by that is leaving a workplace or a boss or a team, so maybe even moving within the business, due to the negative implications it's had on your physical or mental health. Because after that, it leaves a lasting effect on most people. Would you agree with that?
Certainly. When we're doing, I mean, this last couple of weeks, I've been doing a few. I've been working with a lot of fire and rescue services, particularly Warwickshire, Gloucestershire, and Staffordshire. But we've been doing these day ones, and you know what? When we start talking about the day ones, we're talking about challenge state mindset and influences within a business. And I always ask the question. I drop these random honesty out of questions in everywhere, and it's: has anybody ever worked in a blame culture? And there's so many people go, yeah. It's a follow-on question. Did you enjoy it? No, I didn't.
Not unless you were blaming.
Yeah. So when we start, I mean, obviously, a toxic culture isn't just a blame culture. There's a hell of a lot more going on there.
Huge amounts.
However, when we start, it's easy for people to sort of go, right, okay. So if I've worked in a blame culture and I've left a blame culture, sometimes I just think it's normal. But when I go to another culture where there's a lot of trust and there's honesty,
feels odd.
And there's heat, it's like, well, what the bloody hell's going on? So then you look backwards and you think, my God, yes, I have worked in a blame culture or a toxic culture.
Because you're absolutely right, because I think that's something I relate back to from early years of working, is what I saw as normal and almost a bit of banter, a bit of this, bit of that. I now look back now and I'm disgusted with myself that I actually accepted that. And it is interesting what you said there, because from a toxicity perspective, this can be affected by the organizational culture. So generally, so it could be something you've experienced is all the way through the organization. So nobody thinks any different, like you say. It could be caused by individuals, so your influencers. So it could be the whole business and the job that you're doing is fantastic. This one person has caused problems, maybe not even directly to you, but because of the nature of the way they are and the disruptive nature, that causes problems. And actually, let's look at it another way. Sometimes toxicity levels to you are because of your internal beliefs. So what I mean by that is you might look out in the world and some stuff doesn't sit well with your unconscious motivators. So it might not seem as toxic to other people because their traits are different to you. So an example I could give is if you're working within some sort of hustle culture where it's really busy, fast moving, and you've got lots of people who have high levels of drivers, people who really want to work hard and go above and beyond, that's natural to them and it suits them. Whereas someone who comes in who's more on the other side of the spectrum where they want to take the time, do things right and all those things, some of the stuff that comes out as a consequence of that, it's not necessarily that it's toxic to everybody, just for you it feels toxic. And then the other thing about the toxicity levels is it can be temporary. So you can be working in a great environment and then all of a sudden something changes, something strategic changes, your boss changes, the people you work with changes, and all of a sudden the cloud of doom is over your head.
Again, when we start talking about change, managing change, and again, the interpretation or the perception of that change, well, as you said, it's very much down to those unconscious motivators, how I see the world. Where am I a person who moves towards things and goes, wow, I love doing that, I'm going to do it again, and other people go, well, that was a little bit dangerous, a bit scary, I don't think I'll do that again. Exactly the same experience, but interpreted in different ways.
So what we're saying really is sometimes it's the dead obvious stuff, like we know what causes toxic culture. We go back to our Lencioni pyramid and we talk that lack of trust, inability to have disagreements with people or share your opinions, low psychological safety, siloed working behaviors, people not taking accountability, all those things. We get it. And I always explain it like if you're a good leader, I think I heard this analogy once and I loved it. It's like a termite infestation. So if you are listening at the wall all the time and you start to hear that pitter patter, you can deal with it quickly. If you're not listening at the wall, guess what? Completely have to restart again because there's no way you're going to solve that problem. And I think from the perspective of toxicity levels, I think it will depend on the organization. And again, it can be individual. But what I guess what I'm alluding to here is that we don't think about that lasting effects. We just think about in the here and now, let's deal with this situation. But for someone who's been brave enough, and I will say brave enough, to actually lift themselves out of that situation, or they've been lifted from that situation, there's going to be a bit of an overspill. So you're still going to feel quite overwhelmed. You're going to go into the organization, you maybe be a bit risk averse. You may be going to be a bit mistrusting. You're going to find that the triggers are still in there from the lasting, sort of emphasis of what affected you when you left that environment. So therefore, when you come into the new environment, are you truly showing up in your best self? And my argument would be, in most cases, you're not. You're going to try and assume best intent, but you're going to have this lasting effect from where you've left previously. So, if you have a great example would be something really simple like, your boss has a particularly seagull-y day and they come in and drop a load of stuff on you and it's a one-off thing when you're quite new to the business, you might go into a little bit of shadow behaviors, panicking, thinking, God, if this is what it's going to be like, I literally left that hustle culture behind me. And actually, I thought I had a great relationship with this person, but he's just dropped a load of crap on me. And I'm feeling very triggered because that's one of the reasons that I left. It affected my mental health. I couldn't keep up with the speed of the last place of work. So therefore, straight away, you're going to see as a leader from that person, why is this person so triggered? Why are they worrying about that? And it would be little things like, if you were in an environment where you weren't valued, what's going to happen there? You come into a new environment, people give you praise or they act upon your appreciation languages and you almost can't accept it.
Yeah, when we start talking about imposter syndrome, very real. I mean, when we consider this as an entity, I've heard it referred to as a toxic legacy. So with the toxic legacy, it's one of those things where it's almost like your chimp.
Yeah.
So your chimp's looking at things and going tick, tick,
Yeah.
tick.
Looking
Because
out
when
for
we
the
start,
signs.
when we start talking about the chimp and it's 5 times faster and 5 times stronger. When we're talking about that 5 times stronger, it will take every little bit of evidence it can and change it to suit its own agenda.
Yeah.
So all these things going, remember what happened at the last place? See what's going on here? Tick.
Yeah.
And it convinces, or has a bloody good idea, a good go at convincing you that you are actually thinking logically and rationally because you're putting 2 and 2 together and getting 4.
Of course.
Actually, you're not seeing 2. And you're not seeing 2, but you're still... So this toxic legacy. And the point of me actually bringing this up is, when I was considering this toxic legacy, I was thinking, right, so it's really good that we can identify this and we can talk about it, and we can talk to different organizations and businesses about how to avoid a toxic culture. But what role do you play in your perception of a toxic culture?
Yeah,
because
of course.
Yes, that was the bad old days, these are the good old days, but you've got those anchors, haven't you?
Of course you do.
Yeah.
And it can be exhausting. This is the thing. It's mentally exhausting, sometimes physically exhausting for people to carry this burden of, is it going to turn into this situation again? So if you're in the same environment and that problem's been solved, then you're still looking around the business because you're in the same environment, so to speak, but things have changed. The landscape's changed a little bit. So the triggering opportunities are still big, aren't they? But when you leave an organization to go to another organization, you're still, just like you say, going through your tick sheet the first few weeks, first few months even, going, have I saw any signs of this? So what naturally happens there is that you have to try and let go a little bit. And almost it's like, in an ideal situation, you'd allow yourself some time to heal from that, wouldn't you? But we don't necessarily get that. We leave one job, go to another job, or we leave one leader, go to another leader. So it's assuming best intent still and trying to lead with maybe some coping mechanisms as well, thinking about the trigger management, and what we can do. And hopefully then we can then lead into what we need to do to avoid that in the future. Now, if we're leaving one business to go to another business, just as a bit of a segue here, what I think we need to focus on as someone who's suffered from something like this is we're often just drawn in by roles that we like the look of. So we go, oh, I've done that before. I've got experience. I could get that job. Or let's just be honest, salary looks good. Want to work there. Oh, that company has got a great culture from what I've heard. I would work there. It's cool, But in this day and age, people are smarter than that. And if you're going to be someone who's feeling this, you're recovering from this environment, the most important thing for you at this point to help you heal is not to go looking for it from that angle. It's to go looking at the culture first.
Yeah.
So I always say to people, look at the Glassdoor reviews, speak to people in the business, ask the questions about the work-life balance, whatever's important to you within that role or the things that triggered you, ask the questions about it first.
Yeah.
Don't just apply for the job because you got the experience or you want to work for that company, because the reality is that a lot of businesses are fast moving and you're going to see quite a lot of the same things, particularly if we go back to the unconscious motivators part. If you've been in a culture because that's your job and it's fast moving and it's not hitting the mark for you and you're seeing that as toxic, why do you apply for a job that's similar somewhere else? Because the reality is that probably isn't right for you. However, if it is cultural, then find a culture that suits you. Go for the culture first, then look at the role. And I think that would be a better approach. However, if you are in a business and you've maybe just started a new job and you're trying to recover from this, the things that you can do to help yourself feel better, less imposter syndrome sometimes, because that does come through, is you got to look at what it was. So reflect back on what you've learned. So individual or the whole organization, what did you experience that you'd like to avoid? What is it that really, really drained your battery to the point that it actually made you leave the business? And it's not sort of going into a negative side of things or anything. It's looking at how you can learn from that and think about where you can then set boundaries. Because before you go to that next, workplace or next leader, it's thinking about, okay, I want to keep in best self. How can I really learn from what I didn't engage with before? So I think that's a really important thing to do. The other thing is to look at knowing your worth again, because a lot of the time when you've been in that type of culture, you feel drained emotionally. And again, physically, and sometimes your self-worth has really taken a knock. So you've got to think about things like maybe writing a strengths and achievements list, things that you brought forward in your last working environment, even if it wasn't seen, but what you see as a strength. See what you've nailed, the things that you did do that was right. There's going to be some good stuff. There might be some great collaboration that went on, different departments, different people. Focus on that. What were your wins? Because I think that will help you remember what you're going to bring to the next role. And as part of that, sometimes even if you're looking for a job, just updating your CV to be more in relation to your strengths and the things you achieved can actually be quite cathartic, rather than thinking about, I'm going to write that I worked at this place for this length of time, this was my role. The other thing I would say is if you're leaving a toxic environment, and I've, again, got personal experience in this, you've got to decide what you're cutting ties with when you leave that business. Because sometimes the legacy part, which is what you're saying, is that you still have friends and colleagues at that workplace. So you're still getting a little bit of mood hoover coming in from there, because you're talking to your friends that you did get on with, and they're telling you about all the stuff that's going on in that organization. And you've still got that at the back of your head while you're trying to make a fresh start. So you've got to decide who's healthy for you. Yeah. And that can be tough because you've made, a lot of friends in that role.
And just on referring back to another podcast we might have done, we've got to be aware of who's gaslighting us.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Because some people love to put that feeling into another human. Yeah. And even actually, sometimes they don't know. We said this before, they don't even know they're doing it, because you'll be like, how was your day? But the biggest thing you've got in common is that workplace. So then, you'll never guess what happened today. And this happened and that happened. And before you know it, you're back in that space. You're visualizing yourself sat at that desk and experiencing that, right? So I think really choose who you have connections with. That's a big thing. Know your worth. And it is difficult. It's easy for me to say that, but I think reconnecting with what your geniuses are and what you really get, not the stuff you're just good at work, but the stuff you really, really thrive on that will bring you, to your next level. And look for things that actually make you feel like that as well. So like, if you're going into a new workplace and, you want to be more creative and you get your energy from that, then let that known from the moment you get there. You want to do those things and you want to get some energy from that. The last thing I wrote down was actually attitude. It's about really focusing on, you mentioned, threat, challenge, thinking about the growth mindset aspect. Most people that are in a good place have this because they want to learn new things. They want to be open to the world. Quite often when we've been in that environment, we go the opposite way. So I think as much as you can do to try and release that bitterness and avoiding the gossip, which probably goes back to the cutting ties bit as well, because that's going to draw you in again, isn't it?
Well, yeah. And I think that it's pervasive. It goes throughout your mind. So they'll be starting to, there's a potential. It's not everybody, but there's a potential for people to start looking for things that they don't like.
Yeah,
because that's for the culture that they come from.
Yeah.
I didn't like this, and as much as you might not have liked it, it's comfortable and familiar.
And then even if you see a little inkling, so I'll give you an example, like, if you've been in a really, there's been no vault in the business, everyone's, I'm just going to say, bitching and backstabbing, and you come into a business and you're looking for that and you see one person over here just having a little dig at someone else and you think, oh, is that how it is? It's probably not. It's probably just a little bit of a soundboarding moment, but you're assuming the worst and you're thinking, do they do that to me when I'm not here? And then when someone gives you a compliment, you go, is it a genuine compliment? And it's a bit of a worry, isn't it?
It is.
So that's where the boundaries bit comes in. Understand what's important to you. Set that stall out from the beginning. But you should already have a bit of an understanding through looking through the right job, what's involved. And the other bit there is when you first get into the business, spend time looking for positive influence. So if you do connect with someone and you think, wow, they've got a really great balance, or they're showcasing the stuff that I want to learn, then try and connect with as many positive mentors as possible when you enter that new environment, because you'll be drawn along. If they've got a growth mindset, if they're positive and all the rest of it, then you're definitely going to feel in a better place for having that connection.
There's a saying, and I'm hoping that you can sort of either confirm or correct me. You are the sum of the 5 people that you spend most of your time with.
Oh God, that means I'm screwed because I hang around with you. No, do you know what? That is absolutely a perfect example of what we're talking about here, because if you think about the toxic environment you've maybe been in, and I can certainly relate to 4 or 5 in my career, it started off as a little bit of mold in the corner and it just got massive. And then as a consequence, every time you go into that space, even if you're having a great day, it becomes a bad day because so I totally agree with that. And I think that's what I'm trying to get out there is like the more positive. But then if you get someone who becomes almost a mentor, you know, and that doesn't have to be someone above you, it can be someone, you know, sideways. But if there is someone that you can look up to in some ways, that's great. But a sounding board's great too, right?
Yeah.
So I think all those things are important to connect with. The only way you're going to do that is to reflective kind of writing a little bit about it. I think noting these things down and spending some time and acknowledging the feeling, because I think a lot of us try and go, right, to not be in shadow, I'll just do this. I'll put a mechanism in to stop that. But no, sit in it a little while because it will actually allow you to connect with the bits that made you switch off. You know, how did that make you feel angry? Okay, that's one thing. But how did that make you feel sad, emotional, upset? And you connect with those deeper feelings and think, right, okay, so that then caused me to react this way because it was anger, and that way because actually it hit me really deep and emotionally. I think I'm a little bit more scarred than I would like to admit. Whereas when I'm angry, I kick out and deal with it. And as a consequence, they don't see the right side of me. But making time, I think that's a really big thing that we don't do enough of, is allowing ourselves, it's okay to feel like that. It's okay. But we've got to understand how we then put a coping mechanism in place. But then that allows us to set the boundaries, because then we know on that barometer, if I get past this point here, then I'm going to go back to that place and I'm not willing to do that again.
Yeah.
But I do need to remember how great I am. And I think, you know, anyone who interviews you and gives you a role, they assume best intent with you and they look at your best strengths, or hopefully getting you in best self. So if you're honest with them from the beginning about your boundaries and they're honest with you, then, and they care, which a lot of environments really do care about the people that work there, then you're only going to get the best outcomes. Then you can use your experience to influence other people.
Yeah.
So if you start to see things that are not quite right, I don't say looking for problems, but if there's something that you're picking up on, discussing it.
And you've got to understand, not only have you got the potential of positive influences, pardon me, you have the potential to be a positive influencer.
Yeah.
So when we start talking about, I mean, again, random stories that pop into my head, and you start thinking about the fable about the two dogs in the hall of mirrors. The grumpy dog goes into a hall of mirrors, and what does it see? A load of grumpy dogs. A happy dog goes into a hall of mirrors, and what does he see? A load of happy dogs.
Yeah.
So how do you influence the environment that you're in?
Yeah, it's true.
What is your role in this? I mean, yeah, we're talking about perceptions, we're talking about experience, we're talking about learning from those experiences. But what we're sort of saying is, you know what? We can play part of the solution.
We absolutely
moving
can.
forward, positively influencing other people. You know what positively influences you. You get to know your team. You get to know the people you work with, unconscious motivators, possibly even sense of purpose. But you know what works. Just these little, and I'm not sort of saying it's not got to be a checklist thing, but it's things like little micro affirmations.
Oh, absolutely.
Just a little acknowledgement. Doesn't have to be a marching band and ticker tape parade, but a little passing comment, a little acknowledgement of going, you know what, you're smashing it today.
I think if bosses spent more time thinking about appreciation languages, you know, it would go a long way. But you're absolutely right, because if you connect with that anyway, and you let that, you know, that's part of your boundaries, part of your expectations. And I think actually that's both working together, isn't it?
Yeah.
But there is the problem is you've got this legacy. So you've got this almost like this hangover.
Yeah.
So you can't see yourself. And you know what's really interesting about something like this? And from a personal perspective, I think I connect with what I was talking to one of our partners about last week, is sometimes people who fall into this cannot believe that they ever let that happen, because they're actually quite strong people that were just chipped away at for so long that it became normal. And then it takes them that long to come out. And then when they go to another organization, it almost feels like they are getting over, an abusive relationship, because there's a lot of the things that, you know, connect, you know, the emotional sort of content of what people are saying to you and the way that you react. And it's difficult. So using that experience, but trying to do it in a positive way, is definitely the right route. And also, I think the biggest thing is boundary setting, isn't it? It's going back into that situation and saying, I know what I'll accept and I know what I won't accept.
Well, I think just there, you said, I think you made a really valid point, is that it's like, it is an abusive relationship,
Mm.
that you're leaving an abusive relationship, you have to have your negotiables and your non-negotiables, and your clearly defined boundaries, because you don't want to go from one abusive relationship into another abusive relationship.
Out of the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah.
That's what they say.
So
isn't it?
this is the right. I've made that break. I'm not going to repeat that mistake.
Yeah.
What is important to me?
Choose wisely.
Yeah.
So do the research. Look for the right culture. Don't look for the right job. Even the right boss, like, that can make or break. And sometimes it isn't even the boss's approach. It's just the way of the business and the nature of, the way that the job works from day to day. It maybe just doesn't suit you. And I know you can't always pick your boss, but, doing the research to find out whether or not you think you're going to be a great fit, because a lot of the time, and if you're a recruiter, that's the other thing that I always say. I'm really passionate about this. You've got to ask the right questions in the interview. You've got to be honest and transparent from day one. If you think that, this person's really qualified, they come with great references, ask the questions in the interview that dig into their unconscious motivators a little bit. Think about what's, important to them from a work-life perspective, and be open and honest. Because if you think that this job that they're going to do is going to drain them. And the other thing is like, sometimes when you recruit for a job, you're recruiting for a job. Let's say I want a marketing guru. Okay. But at that point, you don't want a marketing guru that's going to invent new things. You want a marketing guru that's going to actually be tenacious and grab the stuff you've already got and just fine tune it. That's very different. So when you're having that interview, you've got to be quite clear on the fact that we're not looking for this creative genius right now. Maybe later, maybe we'll, put that into play later. Right now, the space that we're in right now is we want someone with a marketing expertise, but we want them to take what we've already got and run with it. Now, if we're transparent about that, it means that when that person comes into the business, they don't feel drained by doing all the, day-to-day run-of-the-mill pushing through, getting it done stuff. And they're not feeling like they're not being observed doing the creative stuff, which they know they're good at. If we're clear from day one, then that, again, helps this not evolve.
Yeah.
So set your boundaries.
Yeah.
Know your worth.
Yeah.
Review what you learned and do something with it. Put those coping mechanisms in place. Do your homework on where you're going to work next. And you know what? I'm just going to say it. Assume best intent. Go back in with a growth mindset.
Yeah.
Assume best intent. If there's a warning shot here or there, do a sense check on it. Does it feel like that's a one-off? Or question yourself. Is it something that you saw, someone was having a bad day and you're assuming that it's the worst case scenario, because it maybe isn't. But equally, if you do see something, it's okay to go speak up, because you're going to avoid it happening again, aren't you?
Yeah, and you're going to start enhancing trust.
Absolutely.
In both directions. And as we know, that's the sort of basis of any relationship, whether it's personal or professional.
Absolutely.
So, I think absolutely some really valid points there. But we're just 28 minutes, 10 seconds off 28 minutes.
He likes to be specific. That's his one.
Well, I think it helps. It helps because we've always got something to say, haven't we? And without wanting to labour a point, we need to get the point across. So I think,
Take time to heal, guys, but go in there and assume best intent, reconnect with your purpose, and set those boundaries. And if you're the boss and you see some of this stuff coming out in someone who's come from another environment, maybe rather than jumping to conclusions, maybe do a bit of a sense check on, where they were previously and the ways of working there.
Yeah.
Because I guess if we're looking at it from the other perspective of, are we getting what we want from that person within that first couple of months, we might assume that from a behaviours perspective, they seem a little bit not what we expected. And rather than just assuming that, they're a bit of a knobhead, let's actually ask the questions. Let's go in and be curious and figure it out and keep that person. And all the talent we need.
All the talent we need. Yeah. Good stuff. Tracy Roberts, thank you very much for your time. Always good to get in the room with you.
Thank you.
Before we get back on the road.
Yeah, back on road.
So thanks, Tracy. That's it from this T2 Hubcast. We'll see you for the next T2 Hubcast. So until then, bye-bye for now.
Goodbye.